And now we're going to talk about a book. We're going to talk about avoiding burnout. We're going to talk to the author because I think this book is almost her personal account and her journey through self-healing. She's now documented it. She's got this book out and she's saying that by way of this book, you too can turn your life around. She is Kathy Mann and her book is called Avoiding Burnout, the 7 Principles of Self-Preservation. And isn't that what it's all about, self-preservation?
Yes.
Morning, welcome to the show.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
Lovely to have you here, and I must say that you look a picture of perfect health and there's this very positive, easy energy that I'm picking up from you. But that wasn't always the case. I mean,
No.
In the recent past, you didn't have a job any longer, the business closed down for whatever reason, and I think some of it had to do with your illness, with your disease, your autoimmune disease.
Yes.
Tell us about that. It must have been a very dark phase and stage in your life.
It was very difficult. And it took a long time to put that label of burnout on the illness itself. It's a difficult thing to pinpoint because initially the symptoms were just headaches and fatigue. I got more and more exhausted and I had these terrible headaches. And of course that's quite a hard thing to diagnose for doctors. When you go to the doctor and you say you're tired and you've got a headache, well, it's no wonder with small children and running a business and running marathons, it wasn't a surprise. So
you were still running ultra marathons
when
at the
I
time?
was ill, yes. Yes.
Whilst you were ill?
Yeah.
Weren't you afraid it's going to impact further on your health?
I had to stop at a point when I got too ill, and you know that I was only running up to the point where I didn't realize I was so desperately ill. And once I got a diagnosis, then I had to stop all exercise for about 18 months. I couldn't even do walking, was even too extreme. So it really was a very, very tough time for me and my family. It was difficult to be a mother and a wife and that at that time.
Your husband's also a runner.
Yes.
He's also a ultra-marathon runner.
Yes,
he has continued that path of his, has he not?
Yes.
How do you feel? Are you planning on going back to running at some stage?
I don't think so. I think I realized that I was pushing my body too hard, and I've learned a little bit of moderation now. So I'm doing a little bit more yoga, and I do walking, which is more gentle. In time, I might do things like half marathons. I think that would be great, but ultra marathons are perhaps a little too hard on the body. So,
let's talk about your life and the path that it led you to writing this book. Did you ever imagine that this is going to happen? Life's going to happen to you, and you're going to then talk about it by way of a book called Avoiding Burnout.
I never imagined this would happen to my life. I thought I was working in corporate days before I joined my father's business, and I always thought I'd be a corporate type person in financial services and operating in the IT field. I always imagined that. And then when I got so desperately ill, I had to really reconnect with who I am and where I'm going. And that then spurred a whole new career path and journey for me.
When I was told that I'm interviewing you today and I saw the title of the book, and I thought to myself, in those dark moments of your illness, you must have felt very isolated. And yet this book is talking to perhaps 90% of the population. We don't realize that, do we?
Yeah, I think I felt very alone. I didn't realize how stressed I was and how to get out of it. And, you know, I did those online assessments that measure your stress, and I thought I was moderately stressed and not so severely stressed, and yet my health collapsed completely. So it is a very difficult thing to have that awareness of yourself. So it is important for a spouse who's a concerned spouse to help you see that. That would really help people if you know, you can be told by those around you that you're not quite yourself.
Difficult to hear and to deal with, is it not?
Yes. Yes.
You need to take kind of a self-check, introspection.
Yeah.
You need to then accept that all is not right in your world and you need to do something to fix it.
Yes.
How difficult was your journey to healing, and then when did you start to document it?
The journey was quite difficult. I think I've always been an achiever and somebody who wants to excel. And I think that's the danger, that burnout happens not to the lazy people and the slackers of the world. It happens to the high achievers who are pushing that hard. So that was very difficult for me to try to grapple with, what am I going to do now that I'm actually unable to work for several years and be the person I want to be. So that was hard, but it helped me to give a lot of introspection and realize what I'm all about and where I'm going. So stepping back from life really was a positive thing.
Have you documented all of that in the book?
Yes. So I started my blog probably a few months after diagnosis. And then when I started writing my blog, I realized that people quite benefited from what I was learning about. And then that dawned on me that maybe I could write a book and to share this message a bit further. So that started probably around 2015, the first quarter of 2015, the writing.
You've achieved a lot in a short 3 years.
Yes.
How do you feel about it?
I feel great. I feel that this is the right journey for me, and I feel at home being a writer. Mm-hmm. That is where I get my joy. Writing is the thing that makes me feel alive.
Prior to the book coming, into being, did you ever imagine early on in life that you're going to end up writing a book?
No, I would never imagined. I think that dream was always there. When I was younger, I always imagined that. And I remember looking back on my goals, even 2003, I always had a little goal there, do a writing course or write an article. The need for writing had always been there underneath. But I always dismissed it as a bit of a not serious endeavor. I think often the creative world is seen as not real work. So that's how I positioned it in my own mind. Yeah.
In this day of technology,
Yes.
in this day of instant news and instant everything, instant gratification, I kind of wonder, I've come across so many writers who've written amazing books, from self-help to, stories of heartbreak and everything else, fiction and non-fiction. Did you kind of, even though your blog was very popular and you got lots of positive feedback, were you not afraid to take the step and think that, who's going to read the book?
Yeah, I was very afraid, and I wrote a lot about, it's very much my personal journey, so there is a lot of my personal life in there and how difficult it was for my husband and I to navigate this illness, and a lot of family member difficulties. So it is very difficult and frightening to expose yourself to the world in this way, but I think in writing about our own stories, that's how we help others to heal and to relate to something like that can help themselves.
I have no doubt in my mind that books like these, documenting your personal journey, very definitely touches lives, and very especially people going, through a similar, journey like yours.
Yes.
Tell us about your disease. The moment I hear autoimmune, I'm thinking chronic, you're going to live with it for the rest of your life.
Yes.
What sort of lifestyle changes did you have to make? I know the running stopped,
Yes.
sadly.
Yes.
And how long did it take you to get back to where you are as you're sitting here in front of me, the picture of perfect health?
It took about 3 years to recover, which is quite extreme, but it took a long time to try to understand how to address those aspects of my health. So I got a lot of help from doctors, and
that is documented in the book.
Yes, and I listened to all my doctors very carefully, and I followed their advice. I also did my own research and empowered myself to understand how I need to change my diet, how more gentle exercise would be of benefit, how getting more sleep helps to boost my health. So I learned a whole array of things that I share in the book around how to recover, and that's part of what I want to share for people who don't know what to do when they get this sick.
Now, obviously, we're going to encourage people to go out and buy this book, because I'm sure it's going to be life-changing once you've read the book. But I do want to unpack some of the stuff that you went through and led you to the writing and the publishing of the book. What exactly is autoimmune disease? Normally when I talk about a health issue, I normally have a healthcare professional on the show. But here you're going to be sharing something very personal. You were the patient. What was going on with you?
Yes, so for my health, I had two aspects that were affected, and both in the endocrine system. So my adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys, and they are the ones that release cortisol and adrenaline. They're the ones that release that stress hormone. So those were really struggling, and the function of those diminished quite dramatically. And because I didn't really care for myself, I just ignored it and carried on going as you do. I then developed an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So that is a disease of the thyroid, which means my immune system is attacking the thyroid gland in the throat. And that thyroid gland governs energy, metabolism, and various other processes. So
did you find that you'd maybe lost a lot of weight or put on weight? Or
yes, I gained weight, I think, from the stress, and then I did lose weight eventually when I came right again.
And that is another area of depression, especially with us girls.
Yes.
If you lose or put on too much weight, I mean, it's almost like your world's come to an end.
Yes, and it was quite difficult for me because I couldn't exercise, and I loved exercise. So I gained this weight, I took my medication, I did my best to be healthy. I couldn't go on radical diets because I was trying to eat well, and I couldn't exercise. So that was quite a difficult place to be. Yeah.
Very frustrating.
Yes, very frustrating.
Okay, let's stop for our first ad break. I'm talking to Kathy Mann. She's written this amazing book called Avoiding Burnout, the 7 Principles of Self-Preservation. And if you are stuck at some place in your life, whether it's through a physical illness or mentally you're being blocked out for, have a blockage for some reason or the other, or even if you're having relationship problems, get the book, read it. It's about you. It's about preserving your life, your surroundings, your frame of mind. And once you're better, everything just seems to fall into place. So says Kathy Mann, and I do believe what she says. So stay with us. We'll continue the discussion right after the ad break. The 7 Principles to Self-Preservation is a book written by Kathy Mann, and you don't necessarily have to be suffering from an autoimmune disease. Whatever issues that you are facing in life right now, this book will talk to you. It will probably help you realign, reassess your current situation, and then try and put things back into perspective and work at it. Of course, it doesn't happen magically. Kathy's journey took more than 3 years, but as you can see, she's a picture of perfect health, and may she always remain so. Kathy, back to your illness, and you were talking to us about the autoimmune disease.
Yes.
I understand you were misdiagnosed at some stage as well. How did that, how did that impact on you, and how far back did it push you?
It was very disappointing to realize that I sought help from my GP, my normal physician, and she sent me to a surgeon. And this, I'm not sure why a surgeon, because they don't typically deal with hormones and long-term autoimmune disease. They typically will cut out something that's not functioning. So the surgeon gave a diagnosis, and then only after about a year or so, I ended up at the proper specialist, which is an endocrinologist.
What happened in the interim?
He gave me some medication, and I did get a little bit better. But I have found out that he should have treated the adrenal glands first instead of the thyroid first.
Ooh.
So I found out from other specialists I've seen subsequently that delayed my recovery by a year. And that's quite tragic if you think about the loss of financial, income, and the difficulty for my children. And
you must have been disappointed and angry.
Yeah.
And you were sick on top of it. How did you deal with all of that?
I tried to employ a lot of forgiveness and understanding, and to realize that perhaps it happened for a reason, and maybe I needed the full 3 years to take stock of my life. Maybe it's just part of the journey. When you get that sick, I think you have to really learn that patience and be patient with yourself and the process to get better.
That's very magnanimous of you.
There was a lot of anger at the time.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's also, you often hear the saying that what you put into the universe is what you get back.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that as angry and as disappointed as you are, if you just kind of forgive and try and move on, the good things, the positivity will come back into your life.
Yes.
It'll flow back into your life. And that probably is what happened.
Yeah, I think it lowers your stress levels when you realize that perhaps this was the right thing for me, and it's not good for your stress to worry about all those things that you actually can't change.
You were very sick. I know that people become very ill when they have an autoimmune disease. You've just indicated you were fatigued all of the time.
Yeah.
And obviously, it must have taken a lot out of you. I'm thinking your marital relationship. I'm thinking you had minor children, I think, at the time.
Yes.
How did you cope, and what did your support system look like? Because you couldn't have done it without support.
Yes, it was very difficult for us, and I think it took a long time for us to figure out the way through it. But one of the major things I learned was to ask for help. So I was always one of these capable people, and then when I started getting so sick, I thought, oh, my husband married this capable person. How can I now ask for help? But I realized I really do have to lean on him and ask him for help. And I learned to be very specific. In the past, I said, oh, I'm overwhelmed. And there was nothing he could do with that. But then I started to really hone in and say, I need you to take the kids out for 3 hours on a Saturday, and then I can sleep and rest. And then he had something that he could action and do. And of course he did that, and he did all the things I asked for. So that helped a lot.
Remarkable.
Yeah, and he started doing, I was too fatigued to attend things like the children's parties, so he attended the children's parties, and I learned to do things like shopping for gifts online. And from that he forged quite a lot of good relationships with the fathers, and then they go out for meals with the dads, which is really great. So.
You know what I'm thinking here as we speak about your illness and the support you got from your husband. You were ill as it is. You were very sick, helpless, in a very helpless and hopeless situation, and here your husband took charge. But in the back of your mind, were you even, and I'm sure that you did have those doubts that, what's this going to do to my marriage?
Yes. It was very worrying because I really had to lean on him so much. He had to work a full day at work. He had to come home and cook for the children. It was hard for us, and it was difficult to explain. Fatigue is something you can't see, and I did feel very helpless in not being able to assist him and support looking after the children and things. It was tough. But we've weathered the storm. We're married for over 11 years.
Oh, wonderful. And may you have many, many, many happy years together.
Thank you.
For other people reading this book, it doesn't matter what situation or what illness that they are dealing with, what are they going to find that's going to be helpful for them?
I think a lot of the principles give great guidance in terms of how to make your life better, even if you aren't sick. So some of them, for example, I think the most fundamental principle, which is number 1, is the principle of knowing yourself. So I was doing the work that was opposite of my strengths for a long time in a stressful environment, and that was not sustainable. So if you know that, if you read about that in the book and you realize, let me align my work with my values, with my strengths and talents, then life is enriched, regardless of whether you're well or sick. So that's the kind of thing that people can glean from the book, to align their lives with the best possible outcome so that they can live a happy life.
This book isn't only targeted at people who are battling an illness.
Yes.
Anybody that just wants to get their house in order,
yes,
they could read this book and be able to start putting things in place in their lives. What would that be?
I think things like relationships. Sometimes we don't realize that our relationships are not healthy. I realized that I wasn't asking my husband enough for help. I realized there were some people I was spending a lot of time with that weren't really good for me or good to me. So now I really, on purpose, spend time with those who love and support me, and I spend a lot less time with those who don't. So, and only the illness was a big catalyst for that, to really look at my relationships and decide whether they're worthwhile or not. So that was a great lesson, and many of the principles offer those kind of insights that help people create that better life.
We get back to other chapters of the book, but as you sit here talking to me about the book and about avoiding burnout, what's your situation with autoimmune diseases? Can we use the term remission? Are you in remission at the moment?
Yes, so my lifestyle is now back to normal. I can work a full day and I can exercise and I can still have enough energy for my family. So that was always my goal. Once you have an autoimmune disease, you have it for life. So those antibodies that reside in your blood, they will be there forever. It's now a matter of just managing it, going regularly to the doctor, managing my health, getting enough sleep, taking my medicine, just looking after myself as well as I can.
About 20 odd years ago, there was this catchphrase, people were using it, and they were talking about yuppie flu.
Yeah.
Is that what we're referring to here?
I think so. I have that suspicion that particularly on the adrenal side, people talk about adrenal fatigue a lot, and these days the medical profession has given it a more correct medical name, which is actually HPA axis dysregulation. So that HPA axis is part of the endocrine system, and that is when, for example, your adrenals are pushing out so much cortisol that your body compensates by changing the hormone balance, and that's when you're getting the fatigue and you're struggling. And I have a suspicion that the yuppie flu was probably related to something like adrenal fatigue. Yeah.
I know that you were very fatigued at the time. And I marvel at the fact that a book has come out of it, because just the thought of writing a book is such a huge task. How did you start? And did you ever wonder, are you self-published, by the way?
Yes, I'm self-published,
okay.
Yes.
And I mean, it's an expensive exercise.
Yes.
So what drove you in that direction, apart from helping other people, of course?
Yes, I have a friend who calls me an overachiever for writing a book while I'm burning out, because she just, likes to point fun at me, but that is the kind of person that I am, I think I had this crisis when I got sick to realize, well, if I have no job title, who am I and what am I going to do with my life? And then when I started, as I say, writing the blog, it was helping people, and then I started writing the book, and I thought, well, this is actually, I get quite a lot of joy out of writing. At a time when I was not very joyful because I was struggling so much, the writing itself, the exercise of writing, was the only thing that gave me energy.
And you talk in the book about getting in touch with your creative side. So is that what you were doing?
Yes. And I believe the same friend who calls me an overachiever, she said to me, she guided me a lot in this time when I was really struggling. And she said that a lot of the people who struggle in corporate environments with stress, they have those day-away workshops where they just do Lego and things like that to just connect with creativity and have a little bit of fun. And that allows the brain to relax and then the effects of stress to dissipate. So she encouraged me to do creative work to help reduce those effects of stress, particularly initially. Yeah.
Okay, let's go for our next ad break. Kathy Mann, the author, is my guest. She's written her first book, congratulations, and it's called, obviously, Avoiding Burnout, and I think we all need to read this, because at some point in our lives, whether we're suffering from a disease or not, we do live in very, very stressful environments, and we all want to be super women. I think we need to read the book. I think we need to slow down and just put our lives into perspective. Don't go away. We'll be back with you in a minute or two. I hope you enjoyed. Kathy Mann is the author of a book called Avoiding Stress, the 7 Principles of Self-Preservation. And we all need to work on these 7 principles. We need to preserve our sanity more than anything else. If we don't, we very definitely will burn out. And she, of course, had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And it took 3 years out of her life. But I don't think it was a wasted 3 years. The results of that 3 years, which at the time she probably thought is a waste, that she's lost 3 years of her life, this is what has resulted from that. So everything happens in our lives for a reason, does it not?
Yes, I believe that, honestly. And this was a real catalyst for me to change my life dramatically and for the better. You know, you were quite right. I did think it was a waste at some point, and I was so frustrated throughout the journey of healing. And then at the other side, I really feel very grateful for this opportunity, because I would never have reorganized my life the way I did if I hadn't burnt out.
How much of introspection were you going through at the time?
Yeah. A lot, because I wasn't able to go out much because I was really exhausted. I limited myself to 5 outings a week. I found I got too exhausted otherwise. So one of those would just be going to the shops for toiletries, and then that was all I could manage. So I spent a lot of time alone, and I am quite a thinker. So I did a lot of this internal churning and processing and analysing, where did the stress come from, what should I do to fix it, and how do I restructure my life to make it a better life.
In this process, you can become a warrior
Yes.
and a nag.
Yes.
And you could, in the process, also wear people down, the people around you, to the point where they could kind of just cut themselves off from you.
Yeah.
Did that happen?
I think some of my relationships changed because I wasn't able to participate much. It's difficult to be a friend and to maintain business networks when you don't really go out of the house. So that sort of happened naturally, and that was a bit disappointing. Some of the friends I thought I could really lean on, I couldn't. And other acquaintances who I thought were just marginal friends, they came over to look after my children while I slept.
Wow.
So it showed me the value of the relationships I had. It gave me great insight into the people who are really there for me.
And people's perceptions change about you during this time, don't they? Because there are those friends or colleagues or, relatives, etc., who don't understand what you're going through. They don't understand the journey, the difficult journey that you're undergoing. They think you're being offish, you're being snobbish, and you're trying to cut yourself. You're isolating them.
Yes.
And because they don't understand, they kind of cut themselves off from you.
Yes, or they just think you lazy. You've just become this lazy person who just loafs around at home and doesn't do anything. And that wasn't what was happening. I had this tremendous turmoil inside of me that I couldn't achieve things. And there were many people who didn't understand that. So it was a difficult time.
Did you have the energy to explain yourself, or were you just not so tired, so fatigued that you couldn't be bothered explaining yourself?
I did explain to the people who asked, and that I benefited from. I think often when people are very ill, nobody wants to talk about it, but actually the person who's ill does want to talk about it, and you do. And often friends said, well, what is it like, and what are you going to do now, and things. And that was a great opportunity for me to explain. I think the sad part was when people just made assumptions and didn't ask.
Let's talk about your children. It must have been so difficult for you not to be able to do the mommy, kiddie things that you would normally do.
Yes.
Did they realize that you're sick? How was that? How did that conversation play out? Because that must have been very important between your hubby, the kids, and you.
Yes. So once I got diagnosed, we explained to the children what has happened, and that mom's got sick from stress. And, it was very difficult, particularly for my 3-year-old, to understand that. And we said, Mommy needs a lot of sleep and rest. But, 2 days later, she says, will you do this with me? Will you do that with me? She didn't understand. And sadly, my oldest thought that it was her fault. She thought she caused it because, she was too noisy with her playing. So it took some time to explain that to her, and I also asked that she could see the school counsellor, because I think she connected with me very much, and to see me lying in bed and not being able to be the person I was before, it was hard for her in particular.
People watching us this morning and are going through perhaps a similar journey that you went through, what are the do's and don'ts that you would, advise on? Family, friends, children especially, and your spouse.
Yes.
What would you say is very important?
Well, a couple of things. I think leaning on your spouse, learning to ask for help, and very specific help. That's very important.
You were very fortunate. You have a very, very supportive husband.
Yeah.
It's not always the case with other people.
Yeah. And in that case, then perhaps leaning on somebody who can help you a lot. We have a wonderful nanny at home as well, and she is a great blessing because she also assists me a lot. I also asked her for specific help with certain things, and that's been a great help. And other friends and relatives, just to ask for help is a really important lesson. Sometimes we suffer in silence and want to bear it all, and when we're that sick, we do need the support. And often people like to help. That friend who came over when my children were young, she played with them and had 2 or 3 hours of playing while I slept, and it was a great help, and she was glad to do it. So people do like that. Yeah.
what else should people be avoiding or doing more of during this time?
Yeah.
And I should imagine it's all in your book.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think do more of, take good care of yourself. So the principle 3 is talking about prioritizing self-care. So often I was of the assumption that my needs were not important and everybody else, I needed to look after all these other people. But because I did that, I got myself into a position where I wasn't of use to anybody. So looking after myself.
Do you feel guilty during that time? Beat up on yourself and feel very guilty?
Yes. Now here I am and look, I've done this to myself. Yeah. So that wasn't great. So learning to look after yourself first, you know, that notion of take the oxygen mask so that you can be the mother and the wife and the friend that you want to be. So prioritizing that self-care is really important as well. Sleep, a lot of sleep. People are really cutting corners with sleep. And people brag about how little they sleep and how they're struggling on a few hours and propping themselves up with coffee. That's not a good thing to do. Rather have a great night's sleep. You feel fantastic.
And I guess we all think that we want to be the best at anything and everything we do. But what we're really doing is we're competing against ourselves. Nobody else cares.
No.
Because everybody has the same thought that we're having.
Yeah.
I want to be the best.
Yes. We stretch ourselves so thin and then eventually we break if we push too far.
Okay, avoiding burnout, the 7 principles of self-preservation. It has worked for you. You are the picture of perfect health. So pleased to see how you've got your life together. You've got the book.
Yeah.
What comes after this and what does your future look like?
Yeah, I love doing a lot of public speaking, so I enjoy that a lot, and that's a way for me to spread this message to the world about how to look after yourself and avoid getting this sick. I'm also busy writing the follow-up book called Healing Burnout, and that's more about the healing process and how to invest in your sleep and your diet and lifestyle in order to get better once you are diagnosed.
How different will it be from this book?
I think that one focused very much on my journey on the way there. I'm not going to talk so much about that this time. I'm going to talk about how you fix the problem more.
How have people responded to the book?
Wonderfully. I've got some really great reviews. In fact, my 100th reader said to me that the book started making a change in his life completely. Once he read that, he stepped back and took stock. So that was wonderful. And I've got some wonderful reviews online. I'm very pleased about the reception of the book so far.
I'm thinking about young people, uni students, or young people having entered their first job, or newly married couples. What do you think this book will be saying to them?
I think that would help them set themselves up for success, because often we bumble around life quite reactively and we don't really live on purpose. It's so important for me that we live with real purpose and design our lives to be exactly how we want them to be. And I think that's what can offer young people. And I'm always telling people not to make the mistakes that I made.
Is there ever anything like the perfect job and the perfect life?
No, but it's really important to enjoy the things that you do have, to stop and make the most of what's around you.
It doesn't have to be perfect. No. Love it despite it being less perfect.
Yes. And that's what I often think about those 3 years of recovery. I look back and I think, oh, it was such a struggle, but you know what? It was quite a magical time because it was the transformation into something new.
Apart from the second book that I know you're busy writing right now, 5 years hence, what can we expect from Kathy Mann?
Hopefully many more books and lots of exciting speaking engagements. And I'm also working on a deck of cards that match the principles of self-preservation. So if you're wondering what you want to do, focus on today, you can just pick a card and realize, okay, today I'm going to look at self-care and being kind to myself. So the deck of cards should be quite a fun accompaniment as well.
In closing, what a turn your life has taken. But hopefully by way of this book you're going to be sharing that life-changing adventure with other people and teach them how to heal themselves by way of this book. What do you want to say to our viewers this morning?
I want to say life is a wonderful journey, and sometimes the experiences we think are the most difficult are really a gift.
So grab it with both hands.
Absolutely. And enjoy it.
You can either look at the glass half full or half empty. Kathy Mann, it's been lovely talking to you. I look forward to your next book, and I do wish you ongoing good health and total recovery.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Lovely to have you here. Kathy Mann talking about her book, Avoiding Burnout, the 7 Principles of Self-Preservation. You don't have to be ill. You don't have to be on any form of journey just read the book. The one thing that you will walk away with is to introspect and to realize and to put into perspective what is important in life and what not. So don't waste your time and your life and your energy on unimportant little things. Life is way too beautiful, too rich, and too wonderful to waste away and wish away. Thank you for being with me. It's been wonderful having you on the show this morning.